Yes, we're recording. Okay. Good morning or afternoon or whatever time we're doing with Miss Fairburn's class. And hi, Miss Fairburn. Thanks for asking me to do this. I, I sent you the video last week, kind of talking about how we can use our mind to still our mind, which is really a really important concept for people to understand because we always feel like we're a victim of whatever's going on with us, and that's not necessarily true. But I won't get into that now. I'll just kind of try and answer your questions. First question: am I a weirdo if I have a couple of beer alone? Well, I wouldn't categorize it as a weirdo, but drinking or smoking weed by yourself is an indicator that there's a level of problem that you're not really recognizing. If we are drinking or drugging by ourselves, that's a red flag that we're starting to have a substance problem because the first indicator of a substance problem is to drink or use to manage emotions. If you're sad or bored or having a hard time sleeping and you're drinking or drugging to manage that, then that's a sign that this is starting to be a bigger problem than you actually realize. So it would be uh, better to not do that. There's lots of stress management meditations that would be much more useful. Actually, if whoever wrote that, if you can send me a private message on Facebook or Instagram, I wouldn't mind having a chat with you. I won't get you in trouble. Next question. What are the effects of drugs and alcohol on a brain with CTE or an extensive concussion history? Anybody with, well, concussions are brain injuries. They're TBIs, traumatic brain injuries. And CTE is a degeneration of brain tissue, typically because of chronic concussions. So, cannabis use or alcohol use is always counterproductive to anybody who's had a brain injury because it slows down the healing process. Uh, Secondly, people with uh, concussions often can have a really adverse effect when they do drink. I know I was talking to a young woman from Ontario last week who'd had a couple of concussions, and all of a sudden, every time she drank, she blacked out and couldn't remember what she was doing and was getting very uh, uh, sometimes violent, sometimes just really upset and crying a lot. So, if you've had brain injuries, which includes concussions, it's way better to not drink or drug. Uh, is there a remedy for anxiety besides breathing, relaxing, counting, etc.? Is there treatment? Well, those things actually are treatment. Anxiety is a hyperactivity in your stress response system. And your stress response system is that it's called your sympathetic nervous system. It's been around for like 10,000 generations. It's the thing that made us run away from saber-toothed tigers when we were wandering around in jungles. And it's exactly the same now as it was then. So anything that triggers a fear response in you, and it can be, oh my God, there's a test, or I've got too much to do, or anything like that, triggers that same response system as, oh my God, there's a bear, run away from the bear. And so what happens is if we don't learn to control our thinking, we end up bringing the bear with us all the time. If you're thinking about the past or thinking about the future, that automatically creates anxiety. So that breathing meditation that we did in the video that I sent you on Friday, uh, if you start to use that really regularly, you start to be able to control your anxiety. And the other really important piece of that is that you have to practice it. You know, if you're getting anxious 8 or 10 times a day, then you practice that 8 or 10 times a day, or 12 times, whenever you can. Walking into class, doing a little bit of breathing, leaving class, doing a little bit of breathing, because really what you're doing is teaching yourself to be in the present, be in that moment, because the moment is always manageable. The past or future isn't. Uh, the question also asks, are there treatments? And certainly, uh, if you go to the doctor, they may give you some medications that have some anti-anxiety properties to them, but they don't fix the problem. What they do is relax your brain a little bit so that you can have better capacity yourself to manage the problem. Uh, but all of those things that you mentioned, which are all good, breathing, relaxing, counting, you forgot exercising, but if you uh, if you create a program for yourself where you do some uh, breathing several times a day and throw some exercise in, uh, uh, that will start to get you stronger. It's like building up a new muscle. The other really big piece about anxiety is, and I mentioned it, teaching yourself to be in the present, and uh, and recognizing that you don't have to react to every thought that you have. You are in charge of your mind. And just because you have a thought doesn't mean that you have to pay attention to it. Uh, one of the one of the things that I try and teach people is to, when they're having something, and anxiety is a really good example. When you're having uh, when when you notice that you're starting to feel anxious, if you oh my god, I'm starting to feel anxious, that just makes everything worse. That triggers that stress response system. If when you notice that you're starting to feel anxious, if you acknowledge it, and sounds weird, but do it. If you acknowledge it and say, "Oh, hi, anxiety. Thanks for showing up. You're what are you doing here? Oh, you're reminding me to breathe. Thank you." As soon as you uh, approach it differently, that changes the whole dynamic about how you're responding to it. Because we, like I said, we can teach ourselves to that we can control these things, and they don't have to control us. Okay, next question. Uh, what to do if someone comes to you about their mental health? Well, absolutely listen to them. You have to be careful about telling them uh, too much to do, but absolutely listen to them, because sometimes people just need to talk about it and feel not judged and accepted. But secondly, if it seems like it's a fairly significant issue, please encourage them to talk to somebody who has some training in terms of helping them. Like at Miller, there's really good counselors and student services. And if they're afraid to go on their own, go with them. Let's go down and talk to Miss Barnes Pitt, or let's go down and talk to Miss Berg, or let's go talk to uh, uh, Miss Barnes Wilcox. I forgot her name for a minute. I've only known her for like 30 years. I shouldn't forget her name. Uh, and get some conversation going about it. And I'm there on Thursdays. You're welcome to, like I said before, message me in all sorts of different ways: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, school email. Uh, can steroids hurt me? Uh, well, yeah. Uh, Steroids start to interfere with natural body systems, like testosterone, for example. So, one of the things that many steroids do is they boost testosterone. Testosterone's a a hormone that helps us build muscle. And so when we start taking steroids, we we start to increase our body's capacity to build muscle, but we're also decreasing our body's capacity to produce its own testosterone because it thinks uh, basically your body thinks it doesn't have to produce it because there's enough there, and so that natural system gets weaker and weaker. So the natural body organs like testicles, which help produce testosterone, start to become way less efficient. It's very similar to drinking or drugging to manage anxiety. Our natural anxiety management capacity gets weaker and weaker. Uh, uh, Steroids uh, also throw other body systems out of balance, and we can start to uh, lose some emotional control as well. So uh, it's one of those things that it's way better to stay away from. Uh, how do you be there for someone going through something like depression, anxiety, etc.? Well, I kind of answered that already, but letting them know that you're not judging them, that you care about them, that you're willing to listen to them. But at some point, if all they're doing is talking about how bad they feel, it's important to help them uh, get to do some work with somebody that's going to help to change that thinking, because we can get caught in it's called rumination, where we're just thinking about bad stuff all the time, and that actually starts changing our brain chemistry and we start to feel worse. So again, just talking about the bad stuff uh, isn't all that useful. uh, Anxiety and ADHD. Uh, uh, well, I don't know. Okay, here's what it says: anxiety and ADHD, do they work well or not? Because I have both. Well, both. I'm not quite sure what you're asking, but both anxiety and ADHD have a lot to do with the lack of dopamine supply into the front part of your brain. uh, when we if we're drinking or drugging too much, and too much is way less than most people think, like uh, anything over like for smoking weed 4 times a month, anything more than that is heavy use. And I'm not saying 4 times a month is okay, but anything more than 4 times a month is heavy use, and that starts to reduce your dopamine supply, which will start to increase anxiety. uh, Anything more than uh, 2 or 3 drinks for a teenager twice a month also starts to interfere with brain function, and that will decrease dopamine supply and increase anxiety and increase the impact of uh, ADD or ADHD. And so the breathing and meditation exercises that I talked about can be incredibly useful for those things. And when you do have ADD or ADHD, it makes it a little bit harder to do those. So uh, you have to work a little bit harder at it to overcome it, but it certainly is overcomable. I think if I get help, I will miss too much school. School goes by so quickly. How do I get help with depression if I miss school and it puts me further behind? Well, you don't have to miss school to get help. Uh, and lots of stuff we can do on our own time, that's incredibly useful for helping depression. A 30-minute walk a day by yourself with your phone off, like not paying attention to social media and stuff like that, is probably not probably is the research indicates that it's more helpful than antidepressant medication. Uh, Pay attention to your social media use. Too much scrolling tends to produce depression. Uh, and people with depression are a lot more sensitive to anything negative that comes up on social media. So be extremely careful about that. And there's tons of, uh, on YouTube, there's a, a, a ridiculous number of uh, depression meditations. If you uh, try one of those, and you can't just try it once, if you try one of those every day for a couple of weeks, and particularly use a sleep meditation that helps you get to sleep and helps to settle your sleep cycle, you will notice very, very quickly that depression is starting to lift. You're starting to feel better. Uh, it's really important if you're depressed to not use drugs and alcohol, because that always makes it worse. And certainly we feel like it gives us some momentary relief, but it actually, every time we do that, it makes the underlying problem pretty worse. So quite a bit worse. So we don't necessarily get better. So you don't have to miss school. You don't have to go to the hospital. I mean, if there's self-harm issues, definitely you need to talk to somebody, and you need to uh, get checked out by a medical professional. But if you're just feeling sad and down and no energy, and having some of the symptoms of moderate depression, there's a lot of stuff you can do to help yourself. And talking to somebody is always useful. What's a good way to get off uh, enhancers like I can't read that, SARMs, I think it says, or steroids? Well, uh, like anything, and I do this with lots of kids who are smoking too much weed or doing anything too much, is like really control what you're doing and cut it down by about 50% a week. And then in 3 weeks you're down to almost nothing. But it has to be uh, uh, carefully monitored so that you aren't just doing what you think you should do, but figure out how much you are doing and start to reduce it. 50% a week is usually a pretty reasonable approach. And you start to realize that you don't need it. And again, adding some other things that are going to help settle your mind about this issue uh, are useful, because when you do steroids, it jacks up your system, and you get used to that altered feeling. So taking it away slowly is a more comfortable process. But as I said in the couple of questions ago, it it isn't uh, good for you. Like, it feels good because you're building muscle and you're gaining weight, but there's so many other things that are causing problems for you that you don't really see. It gets to be dangerous pretty quickly, and it's very similar to developing a drug problem. Like, we're doing it because there's something about it that we like, but we don't see the other side of it. It's sort of like that iceberg thing. We just see the top that's sticking out of the water uh, that we do like. We don't see everything that's going on underneath, and we don't really recognize how it's changing us, because it happens really slowly. On the outside, other people will see it. Sometimes they'll say to it, "Hey, you're acting weird, or you're being aggressive, or you don't seem to be the same as you used to be." And we'll hear them and say, like, "I don't know what you're talking about," but they do. So pay attention to comments like that, particularly from your parents, because they should know you pretty well. Uh, okay, that's essentially the same question. How can I stay focused in class if I'm stressed about some things? Well, and I talked about that on the first question. Like, we really have to teach ourselves to not pay attention to things that aren't happening right now. Like, the only thing that I'm thinking about when I'm doing this is what I'm doing. But I've been practicing being present and being mindful. Mindful is that capacity to pay attention to what's happening right now. And so when you catch yourself thinking about something that you're worried about, instead of uh, either continuing to think about it, which isn't useful at all, and remember, it's your choice what you think about. Instead of getting mad at yourself or getting mad at it, uh, acknowledge it, say, thanks for showing up, do some of that breath work that we did in that video that I think Miss Fairburn showed you the other day, and you will start to realize that you can control what's going on with you, and that's the biggest piece of this. And Joe Dispenza in that video that you looked at talked about metacognition. Metacognition is paying attention to what you think, and what you think is up to you. You don't have to think about stuff that isn't useful. So pay attention to that. And if you want to get physically stronger, you'll go to the gym and lift weights. If you want to get emotionally stronger, the weightlifting involved in that is meditation and paying attention to what you think. Why do I feel sick when I have anxiety? Everybody feels anxiety a little bit differently, but some people feel it in their digestive system. And so your digestive system is a whole set of smooth muscles that's hooked up to your nervous system. And when you start to feel anxiety, it can immediately start to affect your stomach, and you'll start to feel sick. I know some people are struggling with anxiety start to feel so sick that they'll start throwing up every morning. And again, number one, drugs and alcohol will make that worse. So if you're smoking weed or drinking alcohol with any kind of regularity, uh, cutting that out is really helpful. Too much caffeine tends to make anxiety worse too, so you have to be careful with that. So no Red Bulls or Monsters or stuff like that, or too much coffee. But again, if you notice that this stuff is affecting you, then uh, you need to start to do something that will change it. And don't think it won't work, because if you think it won't work, guess what? It's probably not going to work very well, and you're not going to be open to it. Uh, if we want to change, we have to be open to change. And the last question, oh, there's two questions. Sorry. Uh, how do I balance needing time for myself or pushing through? Am I giving up if I need time or space? Absolutely not. Like, we all need some time to ourselves. So I've said a couple of times, like a 30-minute walk a day is incredibly therapeutic. It heals us. It connects us with nature. It connects us with the outside. If you've got a dog, take your dog for a walk. Don't take cats for a walk. They just like drive you crazy. But or if you don't have a dog and your neighbor has a dog, go ask your neighbor if you can take their dog for a walk, or just go for a walk by yourself, because it allows our mind to start to unwind. And there's there's lots of really good research that's indicating that too much social media really increases anxiety and increases depression. So pay attention to how much screen time you're on. And there's a difference between screen time doing work, like doing an assignment or reading a book or whatever, and screen time like flipping through Instagram or whatever. Uh, so creating some time for yourself it is important. It's not a bad thing. Uh, and then the last question is um, how do I treat constant burnout? Well, burnout is just like trying to do too much at once, basically. So again, developing a program where you do a little bit of meditation when you get up in the morning, do a little bit of breathing as you walk into class, do a little bit of breathing, or even some physical exercise before you start your homework, taking a break after an hour of homework, and uh, doing some breathing or just taking a 10-minute, 10 or 15-minute naps are fabulous for kind of rebooting our brain. And, that don't sleep for 5 hours. If you're going to have a nap, set an alarm. It's really important to get lots of sleep. So if you're having trouble sleeping, uh, use a sleep meditation and uh, go to bed earlier. And I think one of the biggest problems we all have is we try and do too many things at once, and really we can only do one thing at a time. So figure out what you need to do, focus on that. When you catch those thoughts coming in of, oh my God, I got to do this, or oh my God, I got to do that, um, just thank them for showing up. And it's really valuable to make a list of things that you have to do. A lot of us consume a ridiculous amount of energy trying to remember everything that we have to do. And so, we've got this wheel going around in our head. Oh, I got to do this, and I got to do this, and I got to do this. And just trying to remember that takes us away from whatever it is that we need to be doing. So write it down. And all you have to remember is I got a list. So anyway, that's all the questions. Hope you got something out of that. And Miss Fairburn promised me that she would do some breathing work with you guys at the start of every class. So have fun. And I got to figure out how to pause this. Uh, Stop recording. There we go. Take care.